Joining me now, Ilan Goldenberg from the Center for New American Security. Ilan, the president's dislike for this deal was well documented, well known even during the campaign trail. What do you make of his assessment, though, this strategy with Iran going forward?
Well, I think what we had today was really the worst of all worlds. The president essentially generated this crisis by refusing to certify an agreement that even he and most of his, or at least most of his advisors, believe is working, or at least that Iran is complying with it, even if they have problems with the actual, some of the elements of the agreement. So he generates this huge crisis, which raises a lot of anxiety in Europe, a lot of concern across the globe. And then he comes up with this plan, which is sort of odd and not necessarily really all that much tougher on Iran, could have been done without initiating this crisis in the first hand. And so the end signal to our European partners is we can't really be trusted and we're confusing. The signal to Iran and Russia, China, other adversaries of ours is, well, for all the bluster, this isn't really all that different than the policy we had before. And even to partners like Saudi Arabia and Israel that would like to have seen us go harder on this, there's probably disappointment. So the overall approach is one where we generate this crisis, we refuse to certify, but we don't fundamentally shift things other than now taking something that the president could have done by himself and throwing it over to Congress.
You mentioned now it's going to the hands of Congress. What do you make of the fact that he sort of sent this to them instead of taking action in his own hands?
Well, look, the president could have by himself said, here are my red lines. If Iran does X, Y, or Z on ballistic missiles or on the nuclear enrichment, I will reimpose the sanctions. And he has all the authority to do that. Instead, he basically says, I'm going to punt this to Congress, and I want Tom Cotton and Bob Corker to lead an effort. There's a piece of legislation that will essentially create these quote-unquote triggers that then, if Iran violates, would reimpose sanctions, something he can do by himself, and instead he's handing over to Congress. I think the problem with this legislation is twofold. One, he doesn't need Congress for it, as I said, so it's just sort of, I don't understand why he's doing it. And two, if you do pass this legislation, you're starting to unilaterally renegotiate the agreement on your own without any support from others and put new conditions on Iran that were not part of the JCPOA. So it could also, over time, undercut and undermine the agreement itself.
And Ilan, we've had 3 close U.S. allies and partners in this deal with us say they're committed, they're going forward with this. How do you think this is going to impact our relationship with our allies who went in on this deal?
So I think, Germany, the UK, France, the EU, all of them really are just probably shaking their heads right now and scratching their heads and wondering what exactly is going on in Washington. Because on the one hand, they were terrified that he was actually going to fully walk away from the agreement today. And so for him not to do that probably reassures them a little bit. On the other hand, they're wondering, why did you generate this huge crisis, other than the fact that you don't like signing a document every 90 days that says that Iran is complying by the agreement, even though all of your people admit that Iran is complying by the agreement, simply because you don't want to follow through on something that President Obama did and give President Obama a win, is what it really feels like. And so for our partners, this is a real shaker of confidence. But I would hope that what they do now is say to President Trump, despite how distasteful it might be to them, we're willing to work with you on what you see as the weaknesses of the agreement, and we're willing to talk to you about those, but only if you stay in the deal itself. And if they continue to emphasize that point, that could be a win-win for everybody, because the president can then say, I'm renegotiating the agreement, I have partners on board to take care of some of the problems. At the same time, for them, we stay in the agreement, which is something that they really want.
Ilan Goldenberg, thank you.
Thank you.